But we begin with America's Governor, Ron DeSantis, who's doing an incredible job in Florida. And he tells us why Biden's failure to abide by the Constitution and his constant lies to the American people about the security of the southern border are all the more reason we need Trump back in the White House. Go. We're here with America's Governor, Governor Ron DeSantis. Welcome, Governor. Governor, you've been a member of the House. You've been governor for a while now. You're considered a very, very successful governor. You look at Joe Biden. He has a executive order he puts out. He says, I'm going to fix the border. He destroyed the border. He signed over 90 executive orders. Now he's signing another executive order. We hear that really nothing's changing on the border. He not only violates the Take Care Clause of the Constitution, not only violates multiple parts of federal immigration law, he lies and lies and lies to the American people more than Michael Cohen. What do you make of this?
Well, you know, Mark, when you're in a position of executive responsibility, there's sometimes bad things may happen that are not your fault. There's sometimes bad things are happening that if you had had some foresight, you could have headed it off. And then there's things that are sins of commission. And the border is a sin of commission by Joe Biden. He overturned the Trump policies. That is what has caused the crisis. This didn't just happen out of thin air. It was manufactured and engineered by Joe Biden. So the policy consequences have been disastrous. You've highlighted people, I've highlighted people who've lost loved ones for criminal aliens coming in. We know what's happened with human trafficking. We know what the cartels are doing. And then, of course, just the sheer number of people. You have liberal jurisdictions that are putting the interest of illegal aliens over their own people, which is outrageous. But then you have the constitutional question that you cite. When you put your left hand on the Bible and you raise your right hand to take the presidential oath, you are taking an oath to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And Joe Biden has systematically violated that oath. He has not lived up to the office of president's duty to make sure that our laws are enforced. And then even doubly so, as commander-in-chief, he has a responsibility to ensure and enforce the sovereignty of our country. And he's not done that. And so now what he's trying to do, so they've let in 10, 20, however many millions of people. It's had really negative consequences on American society and in our country and our sovereignty. But then they're going to want to try to pull the wool over people's eyes and try to act like he's the one that's doing something for the border. He's going to blame the Republicans in Congress. And look, I think the Republicans in Congress have made mistakes. I think they should have attached the border to all these appropriations. They refuse to do it. But the bottom line is this executive order is window dressing. It's a farce. But, Mark, and you know, you and I both know, the corporate media is going to run interference for him on this for the rest of the election. They're going to try to act like the border's taken care of. They're going to try to act like he solved the problem. And first of all, that's not true. But second of all, whatever happens between now and the election, the day after the election, he's going to open it back up again. We know that that's going to happen. So it's really up to the American people at this point to put a stop to it.
You know, Governor, Joe Biden likes to accuse President Trump of being a dictator, wanting to put people in prison. Gee, that sounds like projection, doesn't it, from Joe Biden? And on top of that, Governor, he lies about so much. For instance, the Supreme Court of the United States twice ruled against him. He's defied the court. Defied a Supreme Court, two Supreme Court rulings while he's talking about democracy and the Constitution and the rule of law. Then he lies and he says that effectively Trump's going to do what he does. What do you say to this president who's defying the Supreme Court, who defies immigration laws, and in fact defies a lot of laws when it comes to this country? What do you say to him?
Well, you have two things. One is, you're right, Mark, this guy is a serial liar. I mean, on all hosts of issues, on the border, on the student loans, on even minor things that he's constantly doing it. You know, the difference is when Donald Trump was president, if he said something with a comma out of place, you'd have like 10 quote unquote fact checkers from corporate media organizations try to say, oh, that's not true. And they would do all this and spin all this up. With Biden, These guys have gone on a 3.5-year vacation. They basically let him do all this stuff. Very rarely he's held accountable, oftentimes in an indirect way, usually with just friendly fire. So from the whole corporate press, you have a president that lies constantly. You have a president that's not up to the job, and that's not something that they don't want to talk about. But on the constitutional question, he is violating the Constitution with his student loan gambit. They had this statute on the books for 20 years, and all of a sudden that can be used to have taxpayers bail out people with student loans. If a truck driver is taxed to be able to pay off the student loan of somebody that got a degree in gender studies, that's wrong. But it's also not legal. He has not gotten Congress to enact that policy. You know why? Because if congressmen voted to enact that policy, a lot of them would get voted out of office because it's not what the American people want. So he is flouting the law in a number of different ways. But you know what? One of the things that's frustrating is, there's a lot of people that are apathetic out there about all this. And I don't think there's sufficient outrage at how he's conducted himself in office.
Governor DeSantis, is Joe Biden at war with working class Americans, with the middle class in this country?
100%. I mean, think about when he came into office, what did he do? He went on an unprecedented spending spree that has sparked the worst inflation we've seen in the last 40 years. People's grocery bills have gone up 50, 60, 70, 100% since he's been president. Their wages have not gone up that much. He also came in and tried to force COVID vax mandates on people, threatening truck drivers with losing their job and other blue-collar people. He's allowed the open border, which is bringing in people that are working in some of these states illegally. That is depressing wages for working people. And then, of course, if you just look at his overall approach to energy policy, he is putting climate ideology over bread and butter economics for the American people. He wants you to pay more for gas. He wants you to pay more for electricity, and he wants you to pay more for automobiles. Mark, most people don't want an electric vehicle, but most people can't afford an electric vehicle, and yet he wants to plunge us in that area. So it's been a frontal assault on the middle class, on working people, all in service of this really bankrupt left-wing ideology. And oh, by the way, a lot of these big city mayors and prosecutors deserve a lot of the blame for the crime, but Biden is right in there with them on wanting to put people back on the street. He supports eliminating cash bail. He supports all these Soros-funded prosecutors across the country. And incidentally, in Florida, we had two of them here, one in Tampa, one in Orlando. I removed both of them from their posts. They are gone because they put their ideology and their political agenda over their duty to enforce the law, and that put people in their jurisdictions at risk. And so we're not standing for that in the state of Florida. Biden wants to facilitate that all across this country.
In fact, you were sued when you fired that prosecutor, and you won in court the other day. So this is what I mean. Conservatives need to take risks. I don't mean reckless risks. They need to follow their principles and take them through action. And this is one of the things you've been doing as governor over and over and over again. It's not enough for conservatives to whine and complain and wring their hands. When we are in positions of power, we actually have to do things. And if people look at your experience and your success as governor, this is what it's about. It's, I promise this, these are my principles, I'm implementing it, and then we'll duke it out if we're sued. Let me ask you this. Why does Joe Biden hate the state of Israel? That's my view. And hate the prime minister of Israel. He never talks down the fascist fundamentalists that run Iran. He never talks about Xi in a negative way. I don't think he knows even how to spell Un's name over there at North Korea. But it's always a relentless war against the Israelis, the IDF, against Netanyahu. What's his problem?
He's a puppet to the far left in this country. He does not want to offend the far left. He's virtue signaling to them. You know, those pro-Hamas people at Columbia and Harvard, they're taking over the campus, they're taking over offices. That's Joe Biden's base. And so he's got to cater to them by attacking Israel. Those pro-Hamas people are anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel, and that is what Joe Biden has reduced himself to virtue signal, being anti-Israel, all in the service of trying to scrape up votes amongst the far left fringes in this country. But what he's doing is not serving America's interests. Israel is the only ally in the Middle East that we can depend on through thick and thin. They're the only country in the Middle East that reflects Western values and American values. And they've been, and Benjamin Netanyahu in particular, has been a tremendous friend of the United States. So this is rooted in Biden's ideology and in his weakness as a leader, that he has to kowtow to some of the craziest mobs that this country has seen in quite some time.
Governor, one last question. Even the UN and Europe has condemned Iran for pushing out inspectors because Iran is really on the precipice of having a nuclear weapon. The Biden administration was lobbying France, Britain, and Germany not to rebuke them. They finally voted for it, but it was prolonged. Those countries wanted to do it in September. Iran's going to get a nuke on his watch, isn't it? Because he's not doing a damn thing to stop them.
This is just so bizarre, Mark, because this Obama was the same way, and that Obama nuclear deal was a total disaster. Donald Trump came in, he turned the screws on the Iranian regime, and that worked. The regime was on its heels. They didn't have any cash coming in. They couldn't do a weapon because they didn't have the wherewithal to do it. Biden comes out, floods them with cash. They're funding terrorism all across the Middle East. October 7th wouldn't have happened had we had a strong Iran policy. He is paving the way for Iran to get a nuclear weapon, and it's delusional policy, but it's doubly so given that his Democratic predecessor, when he was vice president, tried the same policy, and that policy totally flopped.